All right, let's take a look at our week 1 discussion. So we're going to be talking about raster and vector artwork. This is really, really important to understand right away. The differences between raster and vector. The sooner that you kind of get the idea of this, the easier it's going to be when you do any of your work as a graphic designer. We're constantly dealing with vector versus raster artwork every single day as graphic designers. So let's go over the background of this week's post. Photoshop is a raster-based program. What that means is the images that are made in Photoshop, and that means images that you create by just drawing on the screen, or images, like literally images that you bring in, like a picture that you took. They're made up of little squares called pixels. And if you have ever really, blown up a picture that you took with your phone, let's say, and you really zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, you know how it just keeps getting blurrier and blurrier and blurrier and blurrier and blurrier and blurrier until it's just like you can't even really see what's going on? That is because you're just zooming in on all of those little pixels, and they're little squares of color. So Photoshop does have vector functionality, which means that anything that's vector can scale. It doesn't matter how big it is, it just keeps getting bigger and it never turns to little squares. So, if you're going to use vector, there's better programs than Photoshop for vector, way better programs, but at least Photoshop now has the functionality to deal with vector artwork. It never used to. It used to be that like Photoshop was only pixel based, and now that Adobe just keeps evolving and keeps evolving, I keep telling my husband, I said, eventually there's just going to be like one program, and he feels the same way. He does graphic design too. So again, raster images are Photoshop's photographs, anything drawn, a digital painting, any shapes that are made in the pixel mode in Photoshop, because there are actually 3 modes available when you're drawing shapes in Photoshop: shape, path, and pixel. Raster images are made from pixels, and that's another term for being bitmapped. So again, if you zoom into a raster-based image at more than 100%, you'll see those little squares of color. So for this reason, if you increase the size of a raster image, the pixels are going to become larger, resulting in it looking pixelated, or what we call low resolution. So although raster has limitations, they are necessary for designers who want to work in photorealism in their artwork. So here's again, pixels, you can see that blurry edge, smooth. That's a vector image. So the rule when it comes to working with any photograph, illustration, or other raster-based image is to never increase its size. You can always go down in size, but you can never go up. Resolution is the amount of pixels in a design. So if you have what we call a high res or high resolution image, that means that there are many pixels for every inch of the design. 300 pixels per inch is considered high resolution. If you have a low res or low resolution image, there are fewer pixels for every inch. So high res, 300 pixels, usually if you get something off of the web, that's why we call it low res. It only has 72 pixels per inch. So I just want to open up Photoshop and just show a quick demo of that really quick. I'm going to open up this image. Excuse me. So here is my image, and you can see the image resolution is 300 pixels per inch. So when I start to zoom in, it stays pretty crisp. I mean, you can see that the closer I get, you can start to see some of those squares that I was talking about. But you have to really, 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 really zoom in before the image just turns to squares. And when you look at it at full size, it's a pretty big image. Hold on, I need to change my rulers. For some reason, they're set at pixels. There we go. All right. Nobody thinks in pixels. I was doing something the other day and I had to change it to pixels, but nobody's brain thinks in pixels. We're from the US, we think in inches. So you can see this image is 9 by about 13. This is a pretty big image. And I could print this out at 9 inches by 13 inches and not lose any resolution. But what if I open up a picture of, let's see, this image right here of the woman eating the apple. I'm just going to copy this image and bring it into Photoshop. All right, so with this size, right, it still looks pretty crisp. Does it look as crisp? See how she's all blown up in the screen? All right, let's see what happens if we start to, oh, look, you can see in her teeth. See all the squares that you can see? Right here? All right, let me zoom in just a little bit more. One more zoom, 200%. Wow, I'm already at 348% zoomed in. But if I zoom in, look, you can't even see. Look at her eye, all right? This is about 1 inch. And look at how many squares that you can see in her eye. If I zoom in, well, she's got her eyes closed. Let me do her finger and her finger. So you see how you can see all of the squares in her finger? Here you can't. So this is kind of like showing like 300 pixels per inch, 300 squares per inch versus 72 squares per inch. You can start to see all of those squares at the lower resolution image. So if I wanted to print this out full size, I can only print this out, let's see. I gotta bring it up to 300. This would only be 2 inches by 1.3 inches once I make it printable resolution, which is 300 DPI. So you can see that, you know, you can't really print out an image from the web. That's why those images from the web, they always look blurry when you print them. But if something is scalable, and that scalability is the ability to, again, resize a raster image. You want to be able to resize those images in order to make them fit your design the way that you need to use it. So one important note, you can always take a large raster image, like that big image of the first woman eating the apple, and shrink it down. I can make her image 2 inches by whatever, and I'm not going to lose any resolution. But I can't take even the woman eating the apple. I can't take this image and change my image size from 8.5 to say 16 and keep it at 300. She's going to start to look pixelated if I do that. I'm actually making her low res. It's gonna take a minute because I just told my computer to basically make it ginormous. So see, it's starting to get pixelated, even, you know, just from doing that. I don't want to save view, and I don't want to save view. But when we use vector, we can scale it. We can scale it up, we can scale it down. We never lose resolution. So vector tools in Photoshop, that would be your pen tool or any of those custom shape tools. So those tools, when utilized in the shape or path mode, they create shapes that can be increased or decreased without losing any quality or seeing those little squares looking pixelated. So this is always like a hard thing to kind of wrap your brain around when you first start learning about it. All you need to know is that logos should be vector because vector is math and it can scale up and scale down and it never looks pixelated. But raster is an image or a photograph and it's gonna look pixelated if you make it too big. That's really the easiest way to kind of explain it. Also, it's important that you save any vector shapes in Photoshop as a native PSD file, which is a Photoshop file, so that way they can still be scaled. If you changed it to, let's say, a JPEG, it makes it a photograph right there. Even though you originally created it that way, that's how Photoshop looks at it. It's like, oh, you want this as a photograph as though it never had any scalability? Okay, I can do that. So you gotta kind of remember that. So here's our prompt for this week. Imagine that you're designing a branding campaign for a client that will involve a variety of different deliverables. They want a large billboard, a small postcard, a magazine ad, and then a web banner ad. And each of them is going to have the company logo on it. But the imagery for the company will encompass both photographic elements, so photos, and illustration elements, similar to Apple's advertising campaign for the iPod. So you can learn more about that campaign right here. Research the key differences between vector and raster artwork, and based on your research, describe those key differences. Again, be sure to cite your sources. Look for an example of each of the deliverables described above, and link or embed an image and answer the following questions. Which elements of the deliverables should be created using vector artwork and why? Which elements of the deliverables should be created using raster artwork and why? For your citation, you can use articles that show an example of the differences between raster images and vector images. Your reply post and your initial post should help to work towards a group understanding of this topic. So this shows you how to embed an image, and this shows you how to upload a file to your user or group. I'm going to quickly show you how to put an image in a discussion. So we love Totoro at our house. I'm going to open this image in a new tab, and as long as I need to grab to the GIF just to double check. Yeah, there we go. That one was a little weird. As long as it ends in .gif, .png, or .jpeg, you can just copy the URL. So I've typed in my discussion post. I'm going to click on the little embed image icon right here. And where it says URL, I'm going to click and add that URL, making sure it ends in .gif, .jpeg, .png, whatever it is that you grabbed from the web. Sometimes it's good to put in alt text. So I'm just going to put in Totoro, and I'm going to click update. And there it is. And if you want, it's really good to format your discussion posts. There we go, and then post your reply. So there it is. So again, try to get into the discussion early this week and just, you know, it's going to help you in your assignment and assessment because everything's connected, but also it's one less thing to do. And that always feels good to check those things off the list, right?